Fundamentally, we need to rethink
the tone as well as the content of what he says there.
So
is shocking.
Yeah, well, Stephen Miller is not nobody. Stephen Miller is, in many ways, the intellectual underpinning of MAGA and America First in the White House. He was with Trump in the first term. He is there in the second term. And he is saying essentially, hang on, why has Denmark got Greenland? It's got no rights to it. Well, on that basis, we've got no rights to the Falkland Islands or the Commonwealth or anything or anywhere. And essentially saying, well, if we can run it better, then we should have it. And it also shows, I think, how fundamentally we need to rethink America's attitude towards NATO. Because previous US presidents, any US president going back to this, since the Second World War, would say, well, the whole point of the alliance is that we don't need to take over your territory because you are our partners. The biggest military base on Greenland is America's. The Danes have told America you can expand your military presence. The Danes have told America if it's rare earth minerals that you want, well, we could do some arrangement on mining. But it's America saying, look, I don't believe you've got any rights to this territory. We're the big dog in NATO. So if the big dog wants it, the big dog gets it.
And that is where we are, isn't it?
It is.
Not just on Greenland.
No, it is where we are. There is an intellectual argument about what America is doing and the strategy and the thinking behind it. And it goes something like this. What does Venezuela have in common with Greenland? Well, they've both got a lot of minerals as well as oil. And that if the battle for the 21st century is the battle
for resources
over AI and the battle for resources and the rare earth minerals that you need to run the huge data centers for artificial intelligence, then America can't tolerate a situation where it is dependent on supplies on the goodwill of China. There are only two global players in the AI battle. One is China, one is the United States. And if the United States is going to maintain its preeminence, it needs this sort of stuff. And it's very interesting, when Trump was on Air Force One the other day and we played the clips of, Trump talking about how we might go to Colombia, it's so rotten, and we might go to, Cuba and all the rest of it. There was actually a very important clip that wasn't played out of Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, where he was talking about how now that America has taken over Venezuela, we can revive the mining industry because it is these rare earth minerals as well as the oil. And so America's claim to Greenland and America's claim to Venezuela is saying there are only two people in this fight for global dominance of AI. One is China, the other is us. And unless we can get access to this when we want, on our terms, then we can't be part of the preeminent superpower.
Are they being that explicit out loud?
They're not being far off it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why I asked.
The fascinating thing about the Trump administration is that when there is an accusation of corruption, say, the riposte is, well, how can it be corrupt? We're doing it in plain sight. We're not hiding it. We're not, sure.
Said the pickpocket.
Exactly. So exactly that. Mm-hmm. Does it make it okay if you commit an act of murder and say, well, I've committed, I know.
I showed you I was doing it.
Yeah. I mean, of course not. And so the idea that, Maduro was a terrible, terrible person and a dictator and brutal, and it was a repressive regime and he had run the economy into the ground, all those things. But if I, John Sopel, say, Sheila Fogarty, we live next door to each other. Well, we actually live a few streets away, but I don't like the way you're keeping your garden. And
I've replanted it.
And replanting it. I'm replanting it. And God, you've got quite a nice wine cellar as well. I think I'll have that too. You can't do that. And there is sort of, I know it doesn't work exactly as a parallel because international law depends on superpowers saying we're going to obey it. And if they don't obey it, there is no international law.
And tell me, do you think there's that the key difference here is the fact that they're doing it flagrantly compared to perhaps previous American iterations who did it perhaps less flagrantly, but for the same reasons, influence, safety?
I think that, look, Latin America has always been, since was it 1823, the Monroe Doctrine, which, the Western Hemisphere is our backyard. And that was about, keeping Spain and Portugal from going back in to recolonize Latin America. It's different today, but America has always taken a strong interest in what regimes are in power in their conflict. They overthrew Salvador Allende, the Chilean president. They invaded Grenada when it was part of the British Commonwealth. There have been all sorts of areas where they have intervened. Panama,
yeah.
Arresting Noriega, when the United Fruit Company who had some of its interests threatened, America moved in against the regimes that were threatening an American fruit company. So this stuff has got a long history. But when you start asserting the right to Greenland, which is a NATO member and an ally. I remember a few years ago I went to report from Camp Bastion in southern Afghanistan, which was where the British troops were based, yeah. And you were fighting the Taliban. And there was a big British contingent, a bigger American contingent. Huge numbers of Danes were fighting alongside the Brits and the Americans. And it was an American war, American-led battle after 9/11. And there were the Danes. And so why are the allies who've spilt blood alongside America and for America being treated in this way? And that is why I think that so many Europeans are simultaneously bewildered and alarmed by what is unfolding.
If he does it, we had a caller earlier who I thought landed on the important point that by the time Starmer was asked about Venezuela, it had happened. I mean, I know there's plenty more to develop yet for us to see in Venezuela, but the attack had happened. On Greenland, not so much, not yet. So it was simpler in a way for Starmer to say what he said about Greenland, which is they must decide and have independence and the right of their own nation. If it happens, whatever it looks like, and America goes and takes Greenland formally in some way, can you see Starmer kicking off? I'm not sure I can. Or any European leader.
I think NATO's over. NATO's done. If you've got two NATO countries going to war with each other, or America imposing its will on a NATO country against its will, I mean, the fact that there's a joint communique being issued by the British, the French, the Germans, the Spaniards, etc.
And they're all meeting in Paris today about Ukraine,
saying you can't do this to another NATO member is extraordinary in itself. NATO is done if America forces itself, imposes itself on Greenland. And I think that, all the talk, I mean, one of the reasons that you've got Keir Starmer not wanting to say it is a flagrant breach of international law is that he doesn't want to upset Donald Trump, because he knows that, if you cross Donald Trump, there are consequences of that. He's also playing a longer game. As you say, there are these talks going on about security guarantees for Ukraine and wanting America on side on that. So you maybe have to swallow a bit of some stuff to allow other stuff to go ahead. My only point I would make on that is, how much is a US guarantee worth now on a security guarantee, given what's happened in Venezuela, given what is being threatened in Greenland?
Is there any chance that the Greenland thing, because it would, I think, you're right, destabilize or end NATO in the way that you describe, is there any chance he and Putin are in cahoots over this? That Putin, I mean, I'm speculating here, but that Putin just said the best way you could destabilize NATO for me, because it's my big threat, is end it somehow.
I think that's a bridge too far, and I don't.
Have I
think
been down too many Greenland rabbit holes?
Yeah, look, if you listen to the arguments that the Americans make, and you've got to take it with a pinch of salt, some of what they say, but other stuff you have to think seriously. They're worried about, with the melting of the polar ice cap. Then what could happen is that you've got suddenly all this opening up, and China and Russia everywhere, and America not able to dominate, and therefore it's as a counterbalance to growing Russian and Chinese influence in that area that America says it needs to assert itself. I think that if it was as clear cut as that, then NATO would have collapsed by now.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd need to do kind of a complicated deal with Trump and Putin in cahoots. It sounds like a conspiracy theory too far for me.
Before you go, I'm going to speak to a photographer in 45 minutes or so who was filming up close, chronicling up close the January the 6th invasion of the Capitol. His pictures are extraordinary. I mean, let's just remember that day. On that day, I think Trump told us, fully who he is. And we're starting to see the fruits of it these days.
Yeah, look, I was there in Washington on January the 6th, 5 years ago, and you know, the scenes at the Ellipse, the speech of Trump. You know, there was the whole row over Panorama. Why Panorama needed to edit in the way that they did is beyond me, because it was perfectly clear what Donald Trump was saying, and and one of the great things about, you know, all the things that have been said about Venezuela in the past few days. None of it has been about restoring democracy. None of it has been about restoring, you know, that is very low down on Trump's, you know, minerals, oil, resources, drugs. That stuff is high up there. But Donald Trump sees no need to rush to elections. And arguably the 6th of January, 2021 was when Donald Trump didn't take much interest in elections if he's lost them.